Hey everyone, and welcome to the YouTube channel for Cure CLCN6. My name is Paul, and my 7-year-old son Paxton has an ultra-rare genetic mutation on his CLCN6 gene. This mutation causes a variety of problems for Paxton, including autism spectrum disorder, severe epilepsy, poor motor planning and coordination, hypotonia, which is poor muscle tone, and global developmental delay. So in today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about our journey with autism, because that was the presenting symptom of this mutation. Now, I do want to give a caveat that his autism Paxton being autistic, I'm going to try and use like a person-centric language. Paxton being autistic may not be related to the CLCN6 mutation. And I say that because his younger sister has also received a diagnosis of being autistic. I have a cousin on my father's side of the family who is autistic, and my sister, her son, when he was a teenager, also received a diagnosis of autism. So I do want to put out there that Paxton's autism may not be caused by this mutation, but I'm saying it is because in the literature, other children, the 9 other children who have been known to have this mutation, often presented with autistic traits as well. So Paxton first presented with his autistic traits probably from the time of birth, but being new parents and not being overly exposed to autistic individuals, I didn't really know what was typical and not typical in terms of development. Paxton's first year of birth, he was a very happy baby. He made good eye contact. He was engaged with us as his parents. He was engaged with his babysitter when, my wife and I returned to work, and he was engaged with his family members. But during that first year of life, every time I go into his pediatrician appointments, she'd be asking like, oh, is he rolling over yet? Is he sitting up? Is he stacking, blocks? Is he putting hand to mouth? And I would always say, no, he's not like doing that yet. And it was like, okay, he should be doing that by this point. Let's keep an eye on it. And then when we go in for the next appointment, he would have caught up. He would have been doing those things that she was asking, like, oh, he is rolling over. He is sitting up unassisted. But then she'd be asking new milestones. Is he, okay, he's doing those things now. That's great. Is he doing these other things that children at this age should be doing? And it was like, no, he's not. So in my brain, I just thought he's just a little bit behind, but he's catching up. Well, when I went into his 1-year appointment, the 1-year checkup that you go to, I had to do a screening questionnaire. And on that screening questionnaire, it was about 10 or 20 questions long. I answered them as honestly as I could. And when the doctor came back in the room, she kind of just almost said, like laughing, like, you failed him on everything. And I think she was just so like taken aback, thinking that I was just being a very tough grading father, because she probably has experienced parents failing their children on some developmental milestones, but not every single one. And even autistic children who are displaying those kind of red flags or traits, they're probably making progress or meeting like some areas, but not others. But with Paxton, he was failing to meet all of the milestones. So the pediatrician put in a referral to the University of California, San Diego's Center for Autism Excellence. And so we met with them and we got involved in a study which was measuring the impact of early intervention services on children who are showing these quote unquote red flags for autism. And Paxton really liked his therapy. He got early intervention services, as I mentioned, so that's kind of your precursor to ABA. He was doing speech therapy and he was doing occupational therapy. But throughout that time, I did notice that he seemed to be making very like slow progress. And what was interesting was his speech therapist and occupational therapist, they were probably just giving like armchair analysis, but they did say that Paxton didn't strike them as presenting as like a typical autistic, children that they would normally work with. Paxton's biggest challenges were really rooted in his speech and his fine motor and gross motor skills. Now, he did present autistic traits. I'm not saying he's not autistic. He does meet the criteria. He did receive a formal diagnosis from UCal, San Diego. Some of his autistic traits, though, when he was a child were, and even still, was he didn't use toys properly. He would prefer to just spin things in circles. He enjoyed toys that lit up and make noise. He still does like that. And he didn't really take an interest in kind of looking at books. He would just kind of flip through them really quickly, not stopping to look at the picture or point at things. He would just be rifling through the book, and often found himself bending them to the point that they broke, or ripping, the pages as well. Paxton loved to watch fans spin around. Like when we go to Costco, they have those giant fans on the ceiling, and he would love to watch them, spin. And he doesn't do this anymore, but he would flap his arms when he would get excited. And as you're probably aware, if you're watching this video and have experience working with individuals with autism or in your own personal life, you do know that arm flapping is a form of stimming behavior as well. So Paxton did those, behaviors, but he was also a very social boy. He couldn't communicate very well because of the apraxia of speech. His verbal vocabulary was extremely limited, still is, but he really liked being around people, and he would try to interact with them to the best that he could. And that was a stereotype of autism that kind of deluded me into thinking and accepting that my son was autistic. I'd be looking for reasons of why he's not autistic, and that he would just had a developmental delay, or maybe like a pervasive development disorder not otherwise specified. Just anything that would kind of make me feel a little bit more at ease. But he does meet the criteria for autism, and as I was saying, it deluded me because there's stereotypes that autistic individuals are not social. That is not true. They are social beings because they are human beings, and they do crave that social interaction and connection. And I apologize because my phone just chimed, but I have to keep it near me because Paxton, if he has a seizure at school, they do have to call me. So please ignore that chime. Anyway, Paxton has continued to receive early intervention services. He is now 7 years old, and he has made very minimal progress in his early intervention and in his ABA. He's made very minimal progress in his occupational therapy. He's made very minimal progress in his physical therapy. He's made very minimal progress in his speech therapy. For speech, he did receive a diagnosis of apraxia of speech. But all of these things are now explained by the mutation. I have always told people for Paxton's entire life, I said the autism diagnosis is not his biggest challenge. I said his biggest challenge is the motor planning. It's how it impacts his speech, it impacts his fine motor skills and his gross motor skills. Paxton cannot jump. When he was a bit more mobile, he couldn't run. It was very clunky. He could not walk up the stairs unassisted. You would have to hold his hand, and he still can't do that. He couldn't ride a bike. Now, I understand that many autistic individuals also have those challenges related to motor planning, but from my understanding is also that they are able to learn those skills. They are able to improve in those areas. The fact that Paxton is 7 years old and he still is really, really delayed and stunted in those areas is explained by the mutation. There are other mutations that individuals can have that they call channelopathies, and that does impact people's gross motor skills, fine motor skills, and speech. I believe Friedreich's ataxia, which tends to present a little bit later on in life, such as your teens or into young adulthood, is one of those channelopathies which impacts someone's motor skills. So Paxton is continuing to receive all these services, but he's not making much progress. What's really compounding that challenge is the epilepsy. I'm gonna do a separate video on that, but he began having seizures when he was about 5 years old, 5.5, almost 6 actually. And the seizures is something that he endures on a nightly basis. Sometimes he has them in the daytime, but he is having multiple seizures every single night, despite medication and despite the fact that he has a vagus nerve stimulator implanted as well. So his body is never ever able to fully recover from the seizures. And to top it off, he is taking 3 different medications. He is much more sensitive to the side effects of those medications because they can cause drowsiness, unsteadiness, dizziness, and coordination challenges. When you take a child who is already struggling in those areas because of this genetic mutation and you're putting on side effects of the medication that's being used to treat the epilepsy, you're going to have a child who's going to have severely limited skills. Paxton used to be able to kind of like feed himself. It wasn't like pretty, but he could feed himself. You could sit him at a table. Right now, we can't even sit him at a table. He can't barely hold himself upright. He can't get a fork or spoon to his mouth very cleanly. He's at a point where even kind of finger feeding himself, like just taking the food and getting it to his mouth, can be a challenge. We're not sure if that is because of potential neurodegeneration or because of the medication side effects. But what I hold on to is back in December of 2023, when we were transitioning some of his medicines, we're trying to change him up. He was on Ativan for about 3 weeks while we were titrating him one medication down and titrating another one up. During that time period, there was about a 1 week span where he had no seizures. Not a single seizure in his sleep during waking hours. And what we noticed was in December was he was able to get up off the couch. He was walking around. He was trying to get toys that he wanted. He was going to the pantry to try to grab food or communicate with us that he wanted a snack. But once we came off the Ativan and we continued to titrate up the other medication, the seizures returned. The medication was increasing so that the side effects were increasing. And he became very clumsy and unsteady and had real difficulties with walking again. Now, I'm digressing a bit here because I want to do a separate video on epilepsy, but I want to try to keep this one mostly about, autism. So to wrap it up, because again, this is just kind of a general overview. I want to go into more about Paxton's specific challenges related to autism and how things present. He is in special education class. He is in the moderate to severe level classroom. He is in 2nd grade. But what I've noticed is that even amongst his peers who also present with some significant challenges related to their autistic journey, Paxton does not make much progress even compared to his peers. But it all makes sense now that he has this genetic mutation. It is my hope that one day, Paxton will be able to receive a gene therapy where he can have the genetic code corrected. He can have that base letter corrected. And maybe it can be done soon enough if the science advances. And he could be capable of doing so much more. I wonder what kind of life he might be able to live if he could have this life-saving, this life-altering treatment provided. We are developing a gene therapy for Paxton, but it is not going to be correcting the base mutation because that technology is not safe yet. That needs to be studied at a long-term level. By long-term, I mean what happens when you administer that to someone 10 years or so down the line. What we are going to do for Paxton, though, is a silence and replace approach. So his body, that mutation on the CLCN6 gene, is producing a toxic protein. The gene therapy is going to silence the toxic protein, but he also needs to be provided with a functioning copy of the protein. There's the replace. So we are developing a silence and replace for him. And hopefully in just under 3 years, kind of counting down the months here, 36, 35, maybe even 34 months, he'll be able to receive that. And maybe, just maybe, he'll be in a position where he can start making some significant progress, in these areas. So thank you for sticking with me. I know that was kind of a rant, maybe not have been like the clearest journey through, Paxton's, autistic challenges, but I'm going to do separate videos. For those of you who are watching to the end, this is only my second video, and I'm still in a stage where I'm just working on my craft. This is going to get a lot better as I'm able to, create more content and share more with you. So I appreciate your patience. I appreciate your support, and I look forward to speaking with you again in the next video. Thank you.